Hello my friends, welcome to Program Strings. I'm Henriette and today is lesson 1 of Learn to Read Violin Music Notes. In this lesson today we're going to think about how music is written, and incredibly music is written on a set of 5 lines called the stave. And today we're just going to think about this stave a little bit and how music works on it. Now, without going too far back into the history of music notation, you can probably imagine that in the very first beginning, music was inherited by sound. So people learned to sing songs off by heart from their older generations, and they would pass the music on to later generations. And then very gradually, music became written on a stave. Now, originally the stave was in 4 lines that offered limited possibilities of music writing, and they started writing music on 5 lines, and that is the current stave that we've still got. And it's quite incredible how, if you think about it, how all the music that you can hear when you go into the supermarket and you hear the background music, or you watch a television program and you hear music there, or when you go to concerts, that all of this music is written on a stave of just 5 lines. And today we're going to think about how music came to be written on these 5 lines, because when you come to think about it, it's quite incredible how so much music can be written just on 5 lines. We have to think back now to how music was written before printing was invented. Most music was written in monasteries by monks, and monks were writing by hand all the music that they would sing in their services. And you can probably find examples of Gregorian chant on the internet, and here's a picture of what that would look like. Originally the music was written on 4 lines of the stave, and then it progressed into 5 lines. But they had to agree on where certain notes were on the music stave within the vocal range, that it would make sense to agree on where the note G was written. And so they started indicating where the letter G was, the note with the letter G, that was called G. You can see how the music notation over the ages progressed from the letter G into our current treble clef. In the very early days, they wrote just the letter G, and that circled around this line 1 up from the bottom of the 5 lines. And you can see how this gradually changed over time when they were writing with very swirly letters, how this gradually progressed and turned into our normal treble clef. And it's quite nice to remember that this treble clef originated in the letter G, because you can see where the note G is, and that's this second line from the bottom. Now, I've got some examples of music here, of music staves. You can find them and you can download them from the internet for free, because I want you to go and get started to do some note writing today, later on this lesson. So you can have wider spaced music lines, you can have music lines for young children, or you can have them closer together. But we're using 1 stave at a time when we play the violin, and all your music can be notated on that. I'll show you some music notes now, and you can see that when you have just the 5 lines, some notes can be hung off these lines at the bottom, and you've got what's called ledger lines, and they're just an extension of our 5 lines of the stave, and we can extend it both to the lower end of the stave to represent very deep sounds, and as you go up the notes and as the notes go higher on the stave, they represent higher pitched notes. And especially when you play the violin, you get a bit further advanced, some of the notes get really high, and we use lots of ledger lines. Now, without going into too much detail, you don't need to worry about having to play those very high notes. You can see how these ledger lines are an extension of our 5 lines. So I will have the 5 lines, you can extend these lines to pretend that you've got another stave, and of course we won't write all these lines of a higher stave because that would become very illegible, but for each individual note you can extend the ledger lines of the stave there. Okay, so the lower the note hangs off this stave, the lower in pitch it is, and the higher this note goes up the 5 lines of the stave, the higher pitched the sound is, and that's something very important to bear in mind. Now when we start to read our treble clef, we've got to think about very precisely where that G is, and I've written this here as a little dot, and that is where the note called G is. Now from here I would like you to start to try and write the treble clef, and the treble clef is one clef of a couple of different clefs which you can have, like cellists use the bass clef, viola players use the alto clef, and there's a tenor clef as well. And we're not going to go into much detail because for us as violin players it's slightly less relevant, but I just want you to know that this is one of a possible different set of clefs that are available. I feel like an advertiser now. Different brands are available. Now I'd like you to start to write this so that you learn a little bit about where that G is, and that would help us in future lessons a great deal, you see. So if you start out writing with this dot where the G note is, you can then go around and touch the line above, then touch the line below and go up like that, and go a little bit higher up, and eventually that develops into our treble clef. So this is how the stave works. So in our next lesson we're going to be thinking about which violin notes are the open strings of our violin. So I very much look forward to seeing you then. Goodbye.